The setting is lazily written. It goes for the same nonsense like My Hero Academia and Tokyo Ghoul. It's our world with lots of monsters and superhumans blowing shit up all the time, yet it has absolutely no difference compared to our setting. Everything looks the same and everybody acts like nothing is different. And sure, you can ignore this, as long as the show is not trying to excuse its absence of internal logic. If it's just a dumb action show, it doesn't need to explain shit, so who cares, right? Well, the show cares, a lot! So it is a problem that the show created by trying to make sense of its setting. A big part of the first episode is spent on infodumps that explain a lot of what is going on in the setting. Here is narration about how isekai portals appeared a decade ago. Here is how people have ranks based on how strong they are. Here is how monsters drop loot with which you can create magic items. Here is how dungeons have riddles you have to use your intelligence to solve. It tries a lot to make sense of what is going on. And because it still doesn't make sense why the world is identical to ours despite having monster invasions and people with superpowers, it destroys itself. Because it wants you to think about it. It wants you to take into consideration everything that is going on. Meaning, it tried hard to dig its own grave. And guess what? There's a second issue that manifests because of the mistake to excuse everything, and that is bad pacing. The first episode is mostly spent on infodumps that explain what is going on and which don't make any sense, plus they don't matter because it's supposed to be a dumb rule of cool show. Skipping this nonsense would result in a much better first episode, because it wouldn't come off as pretentious and it wouldn't ruin first impressions by making it come off as smart and elaborate when it's in fact just a mindless action show. Why waste people's time with stuff that not only don't really explain anything, but also don't matter? And that is why Solo Leveling is bad, and if you like it, you have bad taste. There were fanboys who rushed in to defend Solo Leveling by saying the author is allowed to explain how everything works and it's better than assuming how the video game setting works. If it were a smart story written for smart people, and if it had deep lore for people with good taste, I would agree with them. But this is not such a story. It's a dumb power fantasy where nothing makes sense for the sake of coolness. The more you explain it, the more you make it obvious that no thought was put in the story. Explaining how nothing makes sense is only wasting the time of the viewer, and it also works against the entertainment he gets from it. For example, when you make the mistake of explaining that the protagonist hardly makes any money as a hunter, and money is the only reason he is in the dungeon, then he forces the viewer to wonder, why is he not simply getting a normal job? Flipping burgers in a fast food joint, or being a lowly garbage collector picking up trash all day, would make him more money and he wouldn't be almost killed 5 times per dungeon. A normal job would be safer and would pay more compared to what he is doing now. Heck, being a thief who steals the loot from other hunters would still be preferable to getting himself killed 5 times per dungeon while trying to get loot himself. This would not be an issue if the show never bothered to explain how much money he makes. Because it doesn't make any sense. The entire economy of the setting doesn't make any sense. Trying to make sense of it is both a waste of time and only makes it more obvious that you are watching a dumb show aimed at dumb people who have never heard of video games in 2024 and expect an infodump that is wasting half of every episode on explaining what are experience points. Did you know what's a level up? Also, you can make money by selling loot. And none of this shit matters when you make more money without getting yourself killed simply by flipping burgers or gathering trash. Fist of the North Star never explained how people find food in a wasteland or how the protagonist replaces the clothes he rips apart in every episode, because it didn't have to in order to be entertaining, and it would be way worse if it did try to explain it. That's why it's a far better power fantasy. Solo Leveling is trash because it wants to come off as something it's not. It's pretentious and wants to trick you into thinking it's smart with all the generic video game terminology nonsense. There is no point in explaining it. Aside from being the most basic RPG you can imagine, thus everybody already knows what it is about, it also doesn't make any sense. If you look at the statistics, there is no charisma. The protagonist magically becomes super hot in the eyes of all women, and there is no statistic for that. Instead of that, there is an intelligence statistic which doesn't make any sense in a real-world setting. You don't become smarter by placing points in it, you learn by studying or through life experiences. Thus the statistics make no sense. Aside from that, the power system doesn't even follow its own rules. Starting with the protagonist, who is the only one who can level up. Everyone else is stuck with the statistics they are given since day one, meaning the show is wasting your time with statistic numbers going up that concern only one character. Everybody else is just a letter and that's the end of it. Yes, exactly like in One Punch Man, where every city was a letter. That's the depth of world building. And despite that, the show somehow manages to mess up even that, by showing all the nobody characters training to get better when the infodumps clearly state they can never level up. Thus, on top of useless infodumps about a basic power system everybody can understand, and which only concerns one character, you also get useless scenes about nobody characters training for no reason. It's why every episode feels slow and full of useless infodumps and skippable scenes, and it's why despite the praise and hype of the webcomic readers, over half of the reviewers so far don't recommend or have mixed feelings about it. It's supposed to be a power fantasy, yet has no power fantasy, thus making a portion of the audience to walk away. It isn't something like One Punch Man, which starts right away with being what it promised. That is, a guy who defeats everyone with one punch. It begins with a boring infodump, followed by a generic dungeon exploration, where a bunch of nobodies get ambushed by powerful enemies. This is not the main hook of the show. The main hook is the protagonist saying "Arise!" and defeating everyone. But that didn't happen for 2 episodes, so a lot of people are not feeling it. Obviously, not every show can begin with the main appeal being present right from the first episode. Not every story can be like Goblin Slayer, which began in a very similar way, and guess what? It had goblin slaying right from the start. Solo Leveling didn't go for that. It did the mistake of wasting its first 2 episodes in a boring infodump, followed by a boring dungeon exploration, and lost a lot of potential viewership because of it. If it did the smart thing and aired the first 3 episodes right away, this wouldn't be a problem. Can you imagine how less popular Oshinoko would be if it didn't start with an hour-long pilot episode? Aside from that thing that happens at the end, the rest of the duration before and after is fairly average stuff that would have made most of the audience to lose interest. But because it did the hour-long gimmick, it began and ended exactly what it needed in order to hook the audience. Solo Leveling did not do that for 2 episodes. The first episode was a boring infodump, the second episode was a boring dungeon ambush. The main appeal begins in the 3rd episode, which is the "Arise" bullshit. This is why people were reading the webcomic for, and it's why they are watching the anime for. But they didn't get it, and the result is the most hyped up anime of the season that promised super amazing action, losing to the tensionless adventures of an elf waifu and her cute apprentice having slice of nothing moments.